Guys, just super excited to be able to present NGINX Sprint today. It is our alternative to Conf, virtual event, and we've made it more technical, more product. So we're really interested to get your feedback in terms of where you see the technology and the products going, where you see them helping you, where you'd like to see them maybe extend capabilities more. Pretty excited about the service mesh capability that we've released today. We've been heavily involved in microservices since the start of NGINX. I mean, when I joined NGINX in 2012, most of the large web scale guys were using NGINX to do distributed applications. They didn't call them microservices, but essentially that's what they were. Now we've seen microservices sort of evolve into service mesh, and so releasing our service mesh solution today, it's pretty exciting for us. Any thoughts or feedback on the service mesh or other products that you've seen today? I'd really appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess this is not specific to service mesh, more of a big picture question for you, Gus, maybe before we dive into the nitty-gritty details. One of the things you put up on the slide is that NGINX provides maximum value at a minimal footprint, which I think is a well-deserved reputation for the software, and it's kept that over the years. As you guys go about expanding current features, you're adding new features, you're inventing entirely new things inside the NGINX portfolio. How do you as a company maintain that minimal footprint and combat the natural process of bloat that happens to so many things along the way?
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts on that, and then I'll let maybe Sidney also respond. But one of our key ethoses at NGINX has been elegance of the code, and that really came from Igor, from the original way that he wrote NGINX. The fact that NGINX still today is less than 200,000 lines of code, less than 2 megabytes in terms of footprint, and does all the amazing things it does is testament to that sort of elegance. And the way that Maxim and the team, Maxim Konovalov, Maxim Dun and the team that manage the open source and the commercial products, is they bring features that are generally applicable and not niche features that are applicable just to one specific audience but don't benefit the whole. And that way is sort of a gating factor for how they decide what gets in and what doesn't. That enables them to keep that code base small and efficient, but also to do the many things it does that are generally applicable. That same approach Igor is now taken to his new project, which is NGINX Unit, the polyglot application server that's dynamically configurable and supports 7 different languages. So that same approach is taken to NGINX Unit. And as we've built NGINX Controller, it continues to be our vision for where we're taking that product. It's been more difficult with something like Controller to get to that size, footprint, and elegance that we have, but it's definitely where we're striving to get to as we bring more features and capability into NGINX Controller as well. Sidney, do you want to maybe answer or add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I think as an open source project, there's always the interest that folks have to be able to contribute and add capabilities to the solution. But as Gus said, the team has been laser focused on trying to keep the footprint as small as possible, the inner workings as efficient as possible. And, it's like a highly compressed piece of software, right? We take contributions, we take the ideas, but then we try to make them work in the most compressed way that we can, because at the end of the day, the solution we offer is a critical part of so many organizations, applications, and websites. And so we really work to make sure that everything that gets into that footprint is just the minimum required to get the most value that folks are looking for. And so, bloat is something that would work at odds, right? It adds more surface area, it adds more complexity to something that we're trying to keep as streamlined and lightweight and efficient as possible. So we try to protect that very, very much.
So as you just mentioned, Gus, one of the most exciting pieces that I found that was kind of covered today is the service mesh piece, and especially the reference around being able to integrate the service mesh with Kubernetes, with bare metal, and virtual machines. And that's, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because honestly, that is easily the most exciting piece that I just get really excited about that, especially when it's not just in the box Kubernetes only, tying that into the architecture, because there's a lot of interconnected pieces that usually are left on the wayside typically.
Yeah, look, I think that's one of the early design principles here was recognizing that existing approaches were very focused on this specific environment, the Kubernetes environment. But we really quickly realized that the reality is that customers' applications or organizations' applications are not only existing in a Kubernetes world, right? You want to be able to modernize your application and leverage componentry and capabilities that you already have. And so, yes, it's very important for us, principle-wise, to make sure that not only do we marry together the capabilities that a mesh requires, security, observability, control, et cetera, but make it work for any application component anywhere. And so that's key to our approach. It's, transparent insertion, delivering the value in a lightweight, very easy to access way. Again, no bloat, minimal footprint type stuff, but make it work. You're not locked into, I can only, run a application in Kubernetes. I can do it, wherever it makes sense for me.
The thing I was going to add to this is that we've been very focused on making this an enterprise service mesh. By that, I mean, not every enterprise needs to run thousands of services in a service mesh environment. And so other solutions we see are trying to solve a very large scale, complex problem. A lot of enterprises that we see don't have that level of complexity, but want all the advantages of a service mesh. So making it lightweight, quick to deploy, easy to use, easy to configure, easy to trace, debug, all of those elements, and using the power of the NGINX data plane that's been proven over, over 14, actually 16 years now in the wild, we think brings a lot of value to customers. Also, it leverages heavily the NGINX Kubernetes Ingress controller that we have, which is the #1 used ingress into Kubernetes environments. So it's got that capability. And I also love the fact that the security WAF that we brought across from F5 that's now ported on top of the NGINX data plane at Protect now runs in that Kubernetes Ingress environment. So you can actually have a security posture and a WAF at the front end of your Kubernetes cluster, which I think is very powerful for many enterprise customers. So our hope is that our service mesh is seen as differentiated and different in the market to what you're seeing from other providers because of those key focus areas. But the proof will be in you all testing that product and using the beta and telling us what you think. So please, when that's available in the next couple of weeks, download, play with it, and give us direct feedback on what you see and what you think. We'd love to hear it.
It's been a great event, and I have a question for Sidney. So you were talking about how multiple teams can better collaborate with each other. So could you elaborate on that topic a bit?
In general, or on a specific area for,
on general, how you see it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, what we found with NGINX is, people leverage the heck out of it, right? People love using NGINX for, the Swiss Army capabilities, but ultimately what we find is, that love of NGINX turns into a lot of folks wanting to manage parts of it that, intersect with other people. And so, as we look at solutions around load balancing, API management, even, security and service mesh, you start to see, organizations needing to have, single points where, traffic flows through ultimately, but managed by multiple people potentially. And so you see more and more platform teams and, organizations needing to figure out how do I, collect all these configurations and all these demands that these different teams want to be able to have and make sure that it works in a well-governed way. And so one of the things that we've been investing in over the past few years has been better tools to help people not only use NGINX and get the flexibility out of it, but also provide, a management plane or a control plane that really allows folks to set kind of global policies, but enable local flexibility. And so that's been a big part of what we've been focused on here, especially as folks are modernizing their applications, as they break out more services, as they expose more APIs. You start to see, not only do you need, capabilities that act on your application in certain ways, but you also need to be able to collaborate with other teams more and more that are building other services, exposing other APIs. You need to be able to discover those things, understand how they work, and all those capabilities start to come together into products like ours. Because we really do have a really important part to play in not only the flexibility and the features, but also how people access them, not only within the tool, but across the various teams.
So Sidney, on the topic of using NGINX as like a Swiss Army knife, I mean, I feel like that's really what I do as well. Like I'm using it as a reverse proxy, serving static files, caching files, SSL termination, all this stuff. And typically I'm, a solo developer or a freelance developer working with small teams. A lot of today has been focused on, commercial offerings or enterprise offerings. Is there anything like in the pipeline for someone who might just be using the open source version in terms of features? Or, is there a way to try out some of these commercial features for someone who might just be deploying to 1 or 2 servers and, might not want to front the bill for the enterprise plan?
Sure. So I'll tag team this answer with my friend Jon Kuhn. But in general, if you get a chance to go back to the presentation I did talk about the various folks that we build for. And the first section that I talked about was the builders of applications like yourself, developers. And we invest heavily in the open source side of things to make sure we support standards and protocols and just the core capabilities that folks need to be able to take advantage of. And so over the last year and going into the near future, a lot of our focus has been on new web protocols, things like complete HTTP2 support, gRPC support, as well as HTTP3 support, which is very, very, very close to being complete. And so those are the types of things that we tend to focus much of our energy on. We're also adding more and more programmability into the solution, whether it's adding more capabilities to flexibly configure the features that exist within NGINX, or to be able to extend it with JavaScript or potentially other ways as we go down the line. We do continue to focus on the open source core capabilities as being the primary way we allow folks to build applications to make sure they can get the capabilities they need and aren't inhibited by any of the commercial solutions we offer. Now we are investing in not only that open source foundation, but also what I would call maybe some helper tools or some helper solutions that help folks get a little bit better sense of the value they get out of NGINX. And Jon is working on a few of those solutions. Jon, maybe you want to say a few words about what you're working on with analytics and some of the other stuff.
Sure, and I'll just kind of set that in the context of the question, because it's really for that individual team member or developer that is maybe utilizing 2 to 3 instances, and they want to kind of reap some of the value that we see in some of the paid for products. We are, and I'll get to it as a service, but we are creating a freemium strategy where if you have 1 to 2 instances and you need some of that higher order set of capabilities, that will be available both in controller for you to kind of reap the benefit of some of the ADC or API management functionality, and do so on a very small environment, knowing that might be a test environment, something that might grow over time. And that's the same for our strategy for as a service, as we build out our solutions that will be cloud delivered. And the first starting point there in one of the presentations we gave today was around analytics as a service. That will also have a model to where if you have a very small environment, 1 to 2 instances, again, there's a freemium possibility there for you to get a good grasp of the capabilities, the feature set, that visibility to give you insights. And as you scale that up, then you can see how that set of capabilities would help you as you build that environment. And then to the point Sidney was making, there's a healthy roadmap that we're executing towards. We have DNS as a service now, as something that is available today. We're on the precipice of launching primary and secondary DNS. So this is something that will be offered to the NGINX community at large. And as we progress over time, analytics as a service becomes our next offering that we'll be delivering to market, with a future of building more management capabilities that is served up from the cloud service.
Sounds good. Thanks. And I didn't want to come off as like ungrateful, right? It's like NGINX is probably one of the most, one of my favorite tools to use.
We're definitely investing further in the open source project and with developers across NGINX open source, NGINX Unit, and as Jon mentioned, across SaaS with controller, and the service mesh that we announced today is currently, and you may hear more about that, a free solution as well. Calvin, I think you're about to ask a question.
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking on what you and Sidney have just talked about with the open source directions of the project. How has the commercial aspects of NGINX started affecting the open source project? Like, what kind of things will we start seeing to come into the open source project? And then kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, how has the open source project maintained such a low CVE rate? We saw that in one of the questions on Slido during the presentations, and I think it'd be interesting really to dig a little deeper. Are there certain practices that the NGINX team, either at the core of open source or in the commercial part, are using to really deliver a quality, solid product?
Yeah, there's two parts there. One is around the CVE side of things, and the other is how the commercials are affecting open source. So maybe I'll take the CVE side first. It's been remarkable. I was put on the spot in a customer meeting a couple of years ago where somebody, a smart person in the room, asked me, "Hey, do you know how many CVEs NGINX had?" And I was new at the time, so I had no idea. But I was like, "Oh, please don't let it be a bad number, please." And they were like, "Wow, it's been a remarkably low number." So it's always kind of stuck with me. And when I dug into why that's the case, we actually had to do that as part of the diligence for the F5 acquisition. A lot of it boils down to the practices, and as I talked about earlier, the small footprint. We try to keep the surface area as small as possible. We try to make sure that we focus on just the basics, just the minimum needed to get the capabilities done. But also, the security mindset is, we actually had a report done where the people that did the report actually said it's clear that this product was built with security first as the mindset. And it's more about the practices, more about the people. We keep it to a reasonably small set of people that are very experienced with this code, and they know where the complexities are, and they're the best people to be able to figure out where to add capabilities. And so that's not to say, fingers crossed, nothing bad will ever happen, but we really try hard to make sure bad things don't. And on the commercial side, Gus, I don't know if you have comments on this as well, but I think one of the interesting things about being an open source project that's been so popular and having a commercial offer is all the areas that it takes us into, and the dependencies that folks have on our software really does drive our need to be able to do certain things. If we're involved in the largest web scale organizations, and now they're figuring out what does HTTP3 mean to them, or we're involved in the largest organizations, they're trying to figure out, well, now for my complex microservices application, how do I leverage service mesh technology? Well, that's a great kind of leading indicator for us, roadmap wise, to figure out, yeah, here are where some of the largest organizations in the world are going, and we need to make sure that we're there ahead of time so that they can do what they need to do. And so then we have to put that through the filter of, well, here are the things that we do for open source to enable, again, the people who build applications. And then here are the things that we need to add for the folks that operate those applications, because we do have, to support folks that have to run these things at scale and need capabilities that, support those environments. And so, the commercial side and the open source side both drive a lot of the things that we do, primarily because of the breadth of exposure we get as a result.
The only thing I'd add to that, Sidney, is that sort of when we first started having commercial products back in 2013, we put a clear line in the sand of what should be open source and what should be commercial. And we said anything that made NGINX a better web server, we'd put into open source, and anything that extended NGINX beyond a web server use case, such as load balancing or API management, would be somewhere where we would look to monetize. We got 95% of it right, I think, and 5% wrong. And the community are pretty vocal when we get it wrong. I think I remember back in the early days, there was a feature, remote syslog, I think it was, that the community felt should be a web server feature, and we kept it to the commercial product. And due to the sort of nature of the community being very vocal, of course, it helped prompt us to move that back into open source. Anything like protocols, for example, back in 2013 when we launched the commercial product, NGINX was still only HTTP. We added TCP and UDP as protocols while we had commercial products, and they went into open source first. They didn't go into the commercial product first. Sidney mentioned with HTTP3 and Quick, we're doing the same thing again. That's going into open source. So anything that really focuses on the web server use case, we try to put that into the open source community and lead there. Anything that extends the use case beyond that into load balancing or, as I said, API management tends to go into the commercial product. Over time, we're seeing with our efforts around NGINX Controller that more of where we can bring value for our customers is moving further into higher up in terms of into a control plane. As that happens, I'm hoping that eases our ability to put potentially even more things into open source. Obviously, that's where we'd like to go. but we have to continue to fund developers to build the product and build new products. And so we're having to balance that mix. But hope is that you see more features coming in the open source product over time.
How is it that you choose where to go in the market? I mean, you started, like, say, with a web server, but you are now, the way I would describe it is you're kind of moving towards the heart of modern applications. You touch every part of it. So how do you choose that roadmap, and do you feel that you are in that place? Do you feel you are the heart of modern applications?
Yeah, Sidney, I hope you don't mind me going first on this one.
Go for it.
But we've seen this transition, you know, back even in 2012, 2013, when we sort of first started thinking around what we would do with the open source technology to build a company around it. The paradigm that we saw was this movement away from monolith and three-tier sort of service-oriented architecture, Java sort of stacks, you know, built on WebSphere and WebLogic and JBoss, to distributed, lightweight applications. And where we saw it first was the large web scale companies, but where that we could see that easily transitioning into enterprise. The benefits were really clear around, you know, agile development, speed to bring new features and capabilities to market, ability to independently scale these services for web. The downside was all this complexity of the many moving parts in a distributed application. And that's really the problem we've been working to solve. We've solved it primarily at the data plane level. And if you think about things that happen at a data plane level in that distributed application, think of the runtime environment, right? You've got obviously, and that's where the NGINX Unit is heavily focused on, that Igor's project is, current project he's working on. The sidecar proxy next to that, the ingress container into the Kubernetes environment, the API traffic that happens within service to service and externally into other machines, and load balancing, and then securing that environment, both with WAF and with a TLS. So then when you look at all of that, they're all the things we do. And to me, that is the heart of a modern application. So it's not by accident, it's been very much by design that we've been targeting this. And we were targeting microservices. If you go back and look at some of the blog posts that we did with Chris Richardson and Chris Stetson back in 2000, I think they were 14. We came up with 3 different models for microservices back then, and I would argue that we've got over 300 customers still today using NGINX in a microservice environment that aren't necessarily service mesh. And I think many people have bundled service mesh into meaning microservices. I think it's one of many deployment models you can use in a distributed or microservice type architecture. But to me, that is the modern app, and that's where we've been heavily focused on. So I am glad that's apparent to others. So that's a good news. But that definitely has been the vision and strategy. Sidney, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the insight for me also came from, the Swiss Army knife nature, right? We it became very evident talking to organizations that we were being used in many ways. And then we put them all down next to each other. You see patterns. You start to see this evolution that people have between going from their traditional monolithic, architectures, trying to maybe ultimately get to a completely distributed application architecture, but lots of people, kind of stuck in between. And it was never, hey, I only have one type. It's I have every type. And when you think about an organization, especially an organization that has to deal with multiple types of applications, now you think about, okay, well, how is NGINX going to solve those multiple problems, in a meaningful way? And so, yeah, it became obvious that, yes, we need to have a set of solutions that do what folks need for traditional applications, for what they need to do with those stuck in the middle, and for the most modern of applications. And as we started to, put that story together, we started to clearly see that, yeah, there's, ADC-like capabilities that need to sit at the front door no matter what you're doing. But then as you start to break apart your application, you're exposing more and more APIs. API management starts to become more and more important. And when you're modernizing, these are not just, big APIs, they're microservices APIs oftentimes. And now you need to support microservices in addition to the APIs they expose. And so it just became, a clear pattern that we saw where you could draw a straight line from the traditional to the modern. And the common factor across all of it was that NGINX was being used. And so I think it's very natural. It feels very natural for us, at least, to continue to be involved there and to, again, make sure that we focus on the things people care about when they're doing it.
Yeah, thanks. That's kind of how I feel about the journey. And I tried to say that the fact that it is modular and you can take it on in bite-sized pieces, you can add it as you go along that journey. It makes it very easy to consume and to adapt with your transformation.
So you mentioned very early in the keynotes that it's been approximately a year since F5 acquired NGINX, and that's a big achievement to have spent that time. How has the F5 acquisition changed any plans for NGINX, or any has there been any cultural issues integrating the two companies, knowing that NGINX is primarily more open source focused as opposed to a proprietary focus like F5 has been?
Yeah, I think probably I should take that one.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So there's so many benefits that have come from the acquisition in terms of investment into NGINX. Having the footprint of a company of the size of F5, which is roughly 6,000 odd people. The first thing we got when we got acquired, which was May of last year, was about 120 to 130 people that got to, I still run the NGINX product group within F5, reporting into the CEO. They had a project that they were working on that was somewhat similar to Controller. They merged that team with our Controller team so that we could accelerate our development on that solution. So that's a great influx of investment and focus on our technologies and our products to accelerate, so we could bring more solutions to market. Like we've already got Controller ADC, we've got API management, security. Chris Whittick shared that'll be coming out in the next few months, and then Service Mesh, we're releasing that technology. All of that came through that investment that came in. We wouldn't have been able to get that velocity and product set that we have today without that. They've also helped us with engineering at the core data plane level. There were some resources that we have in the US in San Jose that are now joined the NGINX data plane team. So we've been able to extend the engineering capabilities that we have globally around the data plane as well. So to me, it's been a great, as I said, investment in people and resources into the NGINX product set. It's also opened us up to a much wider audience. NGINX, we never really spoke a lot to NetOps people. We mostly were working with developers and IT ops and DevOps. And NetOps was not a really audience we had close proximity to. Now through the F5 audience, we are able to get also to the NetOps buyers and help bridge this divide. We see this, the biggest problem we see in customers is that there is this agility issue. The developers want to run incredibly fast, and they're being chartered to get new code out every week or every day or sometimes hourly. But when they've got to put network traffic changes into their application, many enterprises have a ticketing system to do that can take weeks to get done. Why? Because there are hundreds of applications and 100 application owners, and any one change could break all the applications. So there is a reason behind it. There's this frustration that the teams have with developers wanting to run fast and central NetOps teams wanting to have central visibility, control, and policy and governance. How do you bridge that divide? We were trying to do it as NGINX really from the IT ops and DevOps perspective, but we weren't bridging with the NetOps team. Now we're able to bring those two audiences together through the NGINX data plane and NGINX controller. So the NetOps team can still get that visibility and governance and policy with the security team, and the DevOps team through our self-service portal access can deploy in real time with their code. To me, that's a fundamental benefit to any enterprise company that wasn't possible before the acquisition. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing around culture, I have written a blog on this. I haven't posted it yet, but there are three sort of main things that I would recommend to any other CEOs of a startup as they get acquired. And the main one of those three is culture fit. If you bring a whole team such as NGINX into a culture like F5 and it's not a good fit, you won't have many people left in that startup within a year or so of the acquisition. I've got to say, I felt the culture would be a good fit, but you never know until it actually happens. And I've got to say that the culture fit has been phenomenal. The people at F5 are very similar to the NGINX culture that we had. The corporate values that we had in NGINX match very closely to the F5 values. The inclusion and diversity aspects of F5 are very much in line with NGINX. Now, is it all roses? I mean, we are now 300 people inside a 6,000 person company, so we're adjusting to being in a bigger company with multiple products and salespeople and engineers working on different things that are not competitive, but are competitive in terms of trying to get resource and time. But that's just part of us growing and those teething problems of being part of a bigger company. But in terms of culture fit, I couldn't be happier than the people and the culture that I see at F5 for our culture that we had at NGINX. You know, it's very analogous to what we had. That's at least my view on the question there. I'm happy for Sidney and Jon to add in. And Jon, you may want to add in because you came from the F5 side into the NGINX group, so it'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah, just to build on the whole bridging the divide, that had been one of the challenges at F5 is to really expand the persona base that we had at F5 past the network operations teams. And we coined a phrase called super NetOps, which were network operations folks that were progressive, that were building solutions and automation solutions for their DevOps and app developer teams. But post the acquisition, we were able to look at more holistically the application landscape, including the more of the monolithic or more legacy apps, in addition to modern apps, and unify a set of processes, technologies, and really to bring those personas together, NetOps, DevOps, infrastructure ops, to deliver more value across the organization. And that includes open source, because it's not that every organization is going with a total paid for solution. There's a mix of open source and commercial products there. But I think the net result of that is just we're bringing these two technologies from both NGINX and F5 together, and we've been able to build a much wider set of value for the customers that we're delivering to.
We do have one question here from the NGINX community Slack as well that I'd like to relay in, and that is just simply, is there any plan to offer controller on other platforms similar to how things were with Docker?
So I can take a stab at that. Assuming I understand the question, controller has an architecture of its own, and so we package it up in a way that allows folks to then deploy it wherever makes sense for them. And the current environments that we support are widely varied. You can deploy controller on premises, you can deploy it on the cloud. There are kind of software installation requirements you have, but the controller architecture itself is intended to be highly portable and deployable wherever it makes sense.
I think the question was specifically on platforms other than Kubernetes. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that part.
Yeah, so there's multiple form factors and flavors that we're looking at when it comes to the controller family of products. And so there will be maybe some more streamlined options that give people freemium value in time. And so we'll look at how that makes sense to deploy kind of underpinnings wise. The current Kubernetes based solution is something that we feel strongly is the right path for us going forward. And so we'll continue to have that foundation in place. And then, as you've also heard today, the SaaS option is another one that we're making available. So for folks that maybe don't even want to have to manage any of the infrastructure or the internals, we'll be able to host it for them, or essentially provide it as a service. So we're looking at multiple options for folks, but today Kubernetes is the leading offer.
I had one question for the people that were kind enough to join the call, which is, as we see the transition from many of the applications now running on the cloud, how are you seeing the role of NGINX as a company, F5 and NGINX together in the world of cloud? Obviously, we're making now investments that Jon's presented around us building solutions that are SaaS-based around analytics, around DNS. Where would you like to see NGINX and F5 moving forward in terms of cloud technologies?
So I find it's actually kind of really interesting as you're trying to find those things that position into what's going to incorporate well from a cloud standpoint and such. And I kind of look at it as what you've been doing so far has been really good, which is identifying problems that exist in the marketplace, the things that are difficult to configure, manage, and operate, Istio or something along those lines. And it's really focus on those problems that people have today, those gripes, those challenges. And as you're trying to transcend these products into some kind of cloud basis, it's because it's not just a Me Too play. It's got to be something that's going to do what's already being done today, providing those extra layers and benefits and capabilities on top of it. And you have a great track record of it, and I'm loving what I'm seeing out of that. And that would be the direction I would take going forward. I did kind of have some questions in my head around the DNS as a service and how it plays versus Route 53 or other services along those lines. So that's kind of like, I'm not too sure on that particular direction, but as far as some of the other pieces go, I really love service mesh versus Istio and other directions there. So I'm kind of excited about what type of development you guys are going to have going forward, because and like I said, you have a great track record, and I'm just happy to see all the success and pieces moving forward.
That's helpful. Thanks, Christopher.
Yeah, John, in your session, you said that DNS was step 1 of your as a service offerings. I was just curious, what shape would step 2 and step 3 take? Like, could you give us a clue of where you're headed next?
Yeah, step 2 is to reboot what we have in our Amplify offering. You may have known that from the last few years. We've had a analytics as a service offering. We believe we can take much more value to both the open source community and the Plus community of users with a very easy to set up and to augment the current analytics environments that may already be in place. This one will focus in on giving a unique perspective of the lens of NGINX and the network and application traffic that it sees within its purview, whether that be deployed in front of a legacy application or whether that be deployed as a service mesh application within a new modern app. So we're focused on building the platform that will serve as, first and foremost, unlocking that visibility, giving you that 360-degree view of network and application performance, and then moving from there into some of the management capabilities that we can incorporate. And that first step there will be to take Analyzer forward and not only give you suggestions on how you can make your configuration more efficient, but actually go so far as to make some of those configuration changes for you, especially for users that may not be fully in depth with how to optimize or tune NGINX. We think there's a lot of opportunity there to help all of our customers build more efficient application infrastructure.
I've been configuring NGINX myself for many years, and I'm still not sure if I've got it right. In terms of optimal performance, like, do I have all the things right? I would love to know.
Well, if we're successful with our SaaS solution, you will.
So just to go back to your, where would I like to see you go? I mean, continuing with the simplification. I'm not a developer by trade. I come from the infrastructure side. And moving over into application development and software development lifecycle, DevOps, CI/CD is a complicated journey, and it was complicated for me. It's even more complicated for my customers. So continuing on that path of simplification, but also offering tools that fit at any point. So because not everybody's at the same path in their journey. But there is something that fits everywhere. That whole Swiss Army knife analogy works really well. So continuing simple solutions that I can use everywhere really resonates with me.
One of the things that I would like to see more of, and I think is a good start with the web application firewall peel off from the big IP platform, being able to take more of those aspects from big IP that reside on top of big IP today, and being able to modularize them so that they're deployable on top of a Kubernetes deployment, so that you're able to have those resources where you need them, but not have to have a full big IP VM running to be able to leverage them.
That is a work in process there, Daryl, which is, they call it modularizing big IP, which you'll see more coming from the big IP team in the coming months with exactly that intent. So you will see more happening there.
And yeah, one of the things that we're really excited about having access to now on the NGINX side is more technology that we can apply more surgically, because we And one of the things we hear from organizations is, sometimes security teams, have kind of these blanket policies that may not be as appropriate for every either application or part of the application that they want to apply it to. And so what we find is we have not only the ability within NGINX to put our solution in places, maybe Big IP wasn't able to go, but now we can take that technology and make sure we apply that security very, very surgically, which just overall increases the efficiency and relevance of what folks are trying to accomplish. So we're super excited about being able to do that.
You could even call that little IP.
You should be in marketing, mate. Excellent.
Yeah, I think we're kind of getting back to what you think we would like to see, or I would like to see in a cloud native platform, really gets back to exactly that, like cloud native tools that are easier to modularize and put together. It looks like you're already producing better versions of like the ALB application load balancers, and it'd be interesting to see if there's like serverless pieces you could plug in where I'm managing less and less machines and OSs and things like that, where I just want to deploy function as a service, or I want to just deploy a container quickly and easy, kind of a la Fargate. I'm speaking AWS terms because I'm an AWS hero, but I think that I like the idea of having a cloud agnostic tool set that I could just easily deploy into a container or into VMs in any cloud and get the same tool set everywhere.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I love that as well. And I think that's what we need. We need abstraction from the cloud to a certain level. I think we as I mentioned in my talk, we've locked our applications into infrastructure since I've been in IT, which feels like a long time. And having that abstraction layer so we can have portability of our apps from cloud to cloud, back to private. So you're not locked into any one vendor, I think is important. So
right, kind of like the Terraform of infrastructure deployment, but for applications on the front end.
Yeah, and I'm really super excited. I know the team are as well around edge compute and serverless functions, function as a service. Definitely, if you look at NGINX Unit, there's the opportunity for that project to evolve into something in that space. So we're definitely thinking along those lines, but nothing we can announce or share with you today, unfortunately.
I actually have a question of my own. Would it be fair to say, so given the fact that, as you mentioned, building a better web server is for the open source project, and building better services is the commercial project. Maybe that's not exactly the right words, but that's kind of how I'm hearing it. Is it fair to say that the SaaS product is a way to bring those better services to people who wouldn't typically be enterprise customers? So for example, is that a transition for people like myself, for example, who are using the open source software pretty widely, but might want some of these additional services? It's a more accessible way for us to get at them.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Jon take that one.
Yeah, I think that our design of the services that will come from cloud is to have a starting point where if you are using open source today, you can very rapidly get value in the case of analytics, or in the future in case of management, and the additional use cases that can be put on top of that, like API management and even automation of the ADC capabilities within your CI/CD pipeline. And that gives you a set of capabilities that automates that configuration out of the gate, and reduces the amount of effort that you need to expend, or the amount of knowledge you need to have to set up those use cases. Then as you choose to scale that environment, we start to unlock that value across a much wider set of infrastructure that you're either managing, or a set of apps that you're managing. And I do think that it all has its roots in people who are utilizing the open source product, and then it really can extend that value across, again, the entire group that you're working within, or a set of apps that you're working within.
I have one more question. So now that we're talking about potentially DNS as a service, could this also mean something like NGINX offering a CDN in the future as well? And now maybe it competes with other services out there that do similar things?
So I'll say a word on that. I know, Jon, you got a lot of good stuff planned, but I think one of the things you'll notice is that a lot of folks leverage NGINX under the hood, and CDN and caching tends to be a very popular area. And so it's something that a lot of organizations already leverage us for today. And folks have the ability to actually roll their own using NGINX technology. And so I wouldn't rule anything out. We're definitely interested in making sure we occupy as much space in the application infrastructure as possible. But as I said, Jon has a very long and interesting roadmap to talk about. Jon, do you have any comments on the CDN or other side of things?
It's valid to say that people are utilizing that today across cloud, utilizing the CNN capabilities that are currently in NGINX. The next step would be for us to help automate that infrastructure and provide more of the network and storage services around it. And it's certainly an area of discussion on the roadmap today.
Okay. Yeah, because I was coming at it from the point of view of just, can I just use this as the backend for a CDN instead of configuring my own, as a small scale developer, just using maybe the open source version?
And the short answer is yes, you can. A lot of folks do, leverage NGINX, to build CDN-like capabilities using the open source solution today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of that sort of thing. Like I said, I mean, we're seeing honestly a lot of sort of hacker implementations of some of the commercial things, and I think that's great. I love the fact that NGINX has remained so committed to the open source product as well as the commercial product, because, as you said before, I think that there's a real value in having those two products together in under one roof and with a unified development team, and so it's really exciting to see what you're doing with this.
NGINX wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for the community and for the delegates like those here on this call, supporting us and being advocates for the technology, telling us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank the delegates for being on the panel, for asking great questions, and not just for the panel, but for being part of the community. That's one of the things I love about NGINX. One of the things that attracted me to the company was the community, and the fact that the community is still as vibrant as it ever was. It's just really important to all of the people that work at NGINX. So thank you so much.